channel, we're demoing a true vintage Orange amplifier. This is a 1974 OR120 120 watt Orange amplifier. This amp was made again in 1974, about 5 to 6 years after the company's creation in London, England, between a partnership of Cliff Cooper and Matt Mathias. Cliff Cooper had a secondhand gear store, and Matt Mathias was of Mad Amp, which I know a lot of Orange users are familiar with Mad Amp. There are still Mad Amps today that are out there, including new versions of Mad Amps and new versions of Orange. But they created a partnership together and created the line of Orange amplifiers that we've known since basically the late 60s. This one again, about 5 to 6 years after the company's creation. It's powered by 4 EL34 power tubes, and then it has two 12AX7 preamp tubes, one acting as a true preamp tube, one is a phase inverter tube. You'll also notice when you look at the panel of this Orange amplifier that the control settings are not what you see on most amplifiers today. You'll see here that you have inputs, a low and a high. So this is technically a one-channel amp that you will input into either the low input or the high input. I will say from playing around with this amp myself, this does not have the gain of an Orange amp of today or most high gain amplifiers. So you would probably, if you were going to get one of these yourself, you'd probably more than likely use the high gain just by itself and do volume roll off. It's really great for volume roll off. You also see this knob here that says FAC. This is a frequency activation control, or I should say frequency analysis control. And basically what it does is it changes the resistors by selecting each one of these 6 positions on the frequency analysis control. My personal favorite when I was dialing in this amp was basically the 3rd setting from the left. It just has the right amount of gain and saturation to me that really plays well with the EQ settings as well. That in the intro video, but you basically had these settings when I was doing the Oasis riff demo that I did for Oasis's Supersonic, or something like Oasis's Supersonic. This is the setting that I have here, 3 from the left. This EQ section is hertz and kilohertz. Hertz pretty much is your bass, kilohertz is your treble. I found the sweet spot to me to be roughly what I'd find in a normal amplifier, somewhere around that 6 and 6 setting. I think that for all amplifiers, if you dial them in around 666 or a range between 4 and 6, they usually work really well, or that's a great starting point for anyone trying to dial in their amp. This to me was the best setting that I could find. For the high frequency drive, this engages that preamp tube, that 12AX7, and basically just adds more gain to, even though this is a gain knob, that adds a bit more gain as we kind of envision it as guitar players of today. Gives you a little bit more grit and distortion. Also, the gain is pretty much like the volume for this amp. So the more you turn it up, the louder it gets, and it gets very loud. I have used an attenuator in here. My setup for today's video is pretty much the OR120, my Strat that's loaded with Fishman Fluence pickups, as well as this aux box that you can see me pretty much pointing at here, going into Luna, my DAW. As I've mentioned in other videos, I run pretty much everything straightforward so that you can really hear what the amp's about and make your selections for pedals yourself, or kind of envision what you would do with the amp yourself if you were to acquire one of these. I will also say that it does clean up and it does break up really well, but it has a much more cleaner, or I should say much more clean tone than what you would see or what you can dial in with modern day Orange amps. So for me, when I think Orange, typically I think of like the Rocker Verb 50 or the Rocker Verb 100, as well as the Thunderverb, because some of my favorite artists play those amps. I will say Marcus King has an Orange signature head that I would absolutely love to try out. And it's basically one knob, which I think is crazy. But I would love to try that amp, but they're very hard to find. And from what I found, the stores that do have them don't really have them available to play, just because there's probably a distinct buyer looking for that specific head. I will say though that you can do the Marcus King thing with this amp very well. And from what I've seen, this amp on Reverb and so forth is, you can get one for about $700 to $1,000 cheaper than what you can get the new Marcus King head for. So it could be a really good value for someone that is looking for that Marcus King type tone, more that, Southern blues rock or classic rock feel. This amp is wonderful for those tones. I'm going to be running through just playing some different riffs and so forth. I just heads up on this, I did hurt my hand pretty bad a couple days ago, so not really doing the metal thing because I just can't do it right now. But I can do a lot of classic rock stuff, some blues rock stuff. So that's mainly what this demo is going to be focused on. And really this amp, that's what it excels at. So it's kind of the perfect type of music to do for this demo. So with that said, let's get into some tones. Well, there you have it. That's my short little demo of the 1974 Orange OR120. I have a great time with this amp. As I mentioned, it reminds me a lot of 70s era Sabbath, 70s era Led Zeppelin. So those very classic bands that were using a lot of these amps at the time, they weren't very high gain. They just didn't have that at that point in time, but they still sounded heavy, and it really came from their hands. It came from their technique. So I just really enjoyed kind of having that more nostalgic feel with this amp. Now, if you put pedals in front of it, which we have done as well at my buddy Matt's house, you can get all sorts of doom tones, all sorts of the fuzz tones that you're looking for. But I really wanted to showcase how articulate this amp really is, and just showcase a little bit for you as the listener and viewer what this frequency analysis control does within the amp. It really changes the dynamic, almost like a roll-off of the volume knob on your guitar. I will say as well that when I use the volume roll off the guitar, it kind of acted a lot like this control. I will say I really like this spot, as mentioned at the beginning of the video, where it's 3 from the very left. The left is the most saturated, but I really feel that this tone mixed with the hertz and kilohertz settings at around 6 really do a lot for this amplifier and getting it into that amazing classic rock, almost even some 90s alternative rock tones that you can get with this Orange that I don't feel that you can get with a lot of the other Orange amplifiers without becoming too saturated. Again, this amp will not become very saturated. You pretty much heard how saturated it gets. So for the high gain player, this amp really isn't for you, but for someone that is looking for like blues or country or just really delving into that 70s classic rock tone, this could be a really great amp for you. And again, from what I've seen for prices, excuse me, on some of the more custom shop Orange amps or even the Marcus King signature Orange amp, you can get into this much cheaper than you can with those and probably get the same delivery of tones. I found that the higher priced you go with Orange, it really kind of gets you towards what this is doing. So if you can find one of these on Reverb or at your local vintage guitar dealer, you could save yourself a lot of money. Also, please forgive some of my sloppiness today, as mentioned. Working through it, but I still wanted to play and showcase a demo today. So if you like what you're seeing on the channel, have any suggestions, have any questions, please comment, please subscribe, and until next time.